I'm Russ Heaps, and welcome to this segment of Beer to Whiskey. I'm on my ongoing quest to spread the gospel of good taste, and today I find myself in Fort Worth with some fellow travelers at Rahr and Sons Brewing. And this is a family that's been brewing and making malt and doing all kinds of crazy things for generations, and we're going to find out a little bit more about them. So here I've got Jeff Wood, who is sort of the marketing guy.
Sort of.
And well, sort of. There's some discussion about that, but he's the marketing guy. And we've also got Fritz Rahr, who is the big honcho here.
Sort of the big honcho.
Sort of the big honcho. So Fritz, tell me a little bit about the background. How did the brewery get going? A little bit about the family and.
Well, I was very fortunate to actually grow up in a beer family. My family came over from Germany in 1847, and they settled in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And they set up the very first lager brewery in that state in 1847, and they made beer, but they also needed to make malt because there wasn't a good supply of barley malt anywhere nearby. So they opened up a malt house as well. So from 1847 until about the turn of the century, they made beer and malt. We had 3 malting facilities, one in Chicago, one in Milwaukee, one in Manitowoc. And then we also had 3 breweries in the state as well, Green Bay, Oshkosh, and of course the main one in Manitowoc. We kind of saw Prohibition coming down the line, so the family got out of brewing altogether in the Manitowoc facility, and we just continued making malt. So when Prohibition came, they were kind of positioned well to kind of jump into flour milling, grain handling, anything that they could do to kind of get through those prohibitionary years. After Prohibition was repealed, we didn't go back into brewing because we sold off all that equipment early on, but we still had all the malting facilities going on. So they went straight back into making malt for beer. So when we first opened, the company name was called, or it was well known as the Eagle Brewery, and or the Rahr Brewery, and then after some things happened, they changed the name of the company to the William Rahr Sons Company. The 3 sons named the company after their father, and then after Prohibition, and they renamed the company then Rahr Malting Company, which still operates today, and they just celebrated their 170th year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I'm a 5th generation brewer, maltster, and my kids and my cousins' children are the 6th generation, and they're all in the beer industry as well.
So how long has this particular brewery been here?
We opened up the brewery in 2004. I was working after graduating from TCU. I went straight into the railroad business, handling freight on the marketing and sales side, and I did that for about 12 years. So I was really fortunate. I've had 2 really cool careers so far. At least for a guy. I got to play with trains, and now I get to play with beer. So 2004 was when we decided to open up the brewery, so we're into our 14th year now. So it's been a crazy wild ride.
I'll bet it has. So Jeff, how did you get involved? How did you come into the picture here?
I started about almost 7 years ago now. I just moved to the neighborhood and started hanging out with some of the employees here. And at the time, I was a freelance photographer. So I met with Fritz and met all the guys up here. And they asked if I could do some headshots of the employees. So I came up here and did some photos of the employees. And one thing led to another. And Fritz and I got to talking one day. And he asked if I'd be interested in working here. Asked how the photography business was going. And, you know, at the time, there were so many people jumping on board with the digital photography craze that it was feast or famine, so I'd have 4 or 5 really good months and 4 or 5 slow months. So I was looking for something a little bit more consistent. He hired me on to work the bottling line. At the time, we were a bottling facility only, and I worked that for a year. And then after that, actually, about half a year I was on that, and then the other half of the year I was doing a little of both. I would spend my days on the brewery floor, and then I'd come in the evenings and work in the brewery for marketing. Then about a year after I started, I went full-time into marketing, creative director, doing all the graphics and logos and designs and product and t-shirts and all that fun stuff. So
I understand that the cans of beer that we see, the 6-packs and assorted cans we see here, you just redid all the labeling and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we just
correct?
did kind of a rebranding, a little bit of a refresh. We didn't start from scratch. We kept kind of our core brand logos intact, but I just wanted a real streamlined, uniform, color-coded can scheme for us to use, something that was kind of classic and timeless. And so we just kind of did that.
I'm looking at mountains of cans of 6-packs of beer. Do you guys pretty much can everything you make?
Yeah, we're a 100% can facility now.
Yeah, we were in bottles, but we had a lot of inefficiencies in our bottling line. So we decided to just kind of move everything over to a can anyway. So all the cans you see here in the warehouse, those are all empty. Those are just blanks that go into the filler. A lot of people come in and go, well, I guess you need more cooler space. And it's like, no, those are empty. Those aren't full.
Yeah. So I'm assuming, Fritz, that since your family came from a brewing family, or that is a brewing family, that you've sort of been with craft beer forever. I mean, right. Did you ever go through a Bud Light or Silver Bullet phase, or?
Well, sure. I wouldn't even say I'm not out of that phase now. People being in the craft beer industry, I really appreciate a well-made beer, well-made craft beer. But there's absolutely nothing, and I'll probably be beat up on this comment. There's nothing wrong with a Miller Lite. I mean, those beers fill a market niche that people want, and believe it or not, those are some of the hardest beers to brew. I mean, to brew a beer, and I don't mean this in a bad way, that has little to no flavor, and make it consistent over and over and over again, it's very difficult. Any little flaw in that beer, you will notice.
Yeah.
Right.
So for those guys to make the amount of beer that they brew and to have it all consistent and taste the same is, to be honest, is really amazing. I love my craft beer, but there are times when, I want something that's just a little bit lighter and I don't want to drink water, and I want something that tastes like beer and is good. So, so I drink a wide variety of things. I'm probably going to get completely beat up for those comments, but I'm also
all right.
an old guy, so I don't drink like I used to.
You get beat up for everything.
I don't know. You've been doing pretty well today so far.
So I don't consume as much in volume as I used to. So when I do, it's really something that I really, really want.
When you are drinking something other than your own beer, is it typically because it's something you want to drink?
I have a personal rule. If I'm at a location that serves my beer, I'm always going to have at least one of my beers. Not because it's just there, but because I really like my beer.
Right.
And if there's not, I might have another beer, or I might have some whiskey or a scotch or even a glass of wine. So it really all depends on what kind of mood I'm in. But if they're serving my beer, I absolutely always have one of my beers, because I want to know how it tastes. I want to know how it's traveled to that location, and taste the freshness, and make sure the quality of the product is still where we want it to be. And so when I go out, I always ask for a Rahr beer.
Jeff, is there a particular beer that got you started on the craft beer trail?
My beer story is a little bit.
It was a Rahr beer, wasn't it?
No, it's a little bit unique in the fact that I didn't have my first sip of alcohol till I was 30, and I had my first beer at 34, which was less than 10 years ago. That's not the typical male Texan path. So my first beer was at the Mocan drag strip when I was shooting dragsters. I was hot. This was in Kansas and up in like the Joplin area, Missouri. And all they had on set was Miller Lite. There was no water, nothing. And it's August, we're out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm hot. And I was drinking the melted ice water. And finally somebody's like, just drink a little bit of the beer, get something in you. So I drank a little bit of that, and it was horrible. Your first beer is always pretty tragic. But then, after a month or two,
He's the marketing guy.
if everybody can think back to their first beer, a lot of people, it was like 4, 5, 6, and 7. For me, it was 34.
So what you're saying is when people try our beer for the first time, we need to make sure it's their second beer and not their first beer?
First beer is never good. So anyway, after a couple of months went by, I started talking to some friends, and I drank a beer, and they're like, whoa, that was crazy. And like a lot of people, my first craft beer was Fat Tire. At the time, that was one of the only craft beers that when you walked into a grocery store or a bar, you saw a lot of.
Right.
So it was, that's the gateway beer for a lot of people, and I followed that path just probably about 10 or 12 years later than most people. And it went from there. I dabbled around in a few things, slowly started getting into hoppy beers, IPAs, and now I like the whole spectrum. So
I think it's very similar. I mean, I remember, the craft beer scene 25, 30 years ago, and it was pretty much non-existent, at least in Minnesota, where I was growing up, and here in North Texas. But there was a brewery up in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, which I think they made great beer, and it's Summit Brewing Company. And I have to be honest, I think that was my first beer was a Summit Extra Pale Ale.
yeah.
And really from that point on, I think I kind of fell in love with the whole craft side. I mean, I grew up around Bud Miller Coors because they were major customers of my family's business. So I never really had that opportunity to drink much of anything else. My dad didn't keep Fat Tire or some of these other beers at home. So when that brewery opened up, that was kind of my first real introduction into what craft beer was all about.
Do you guys have a particular style of beer that you like to make, or is it all over the map? I mean, we've got what, 4 or 5 different things here on the bar. Is there something that you guys sort of gravitate to?
I think at least for me, it's where am I, what's the situation, and what I'm feeling. Everyone goes, what's your favorite beer that you make? And I said, I don't know if I can tell you that. You have to ask me on any certain given day. I love Saison styles of beer overall. So maybe that's my favorite style of beer. But when it comes down to our beer, it really is what's in my hand and how I'm feeling that day. We're coming out with this new beer here called Adios Pantalones, and I honestly say this may be now my new favorite Rahr beer, and I put that in quotes because I love all my beers.
Right.
But right now, this is the one that's really quote unquote floating my boat, so to speak.
Tell me a little bit about it.
It's a session ale, lower alcohol. And we use real lime and real lemon in the product, in the beer as well, to give it a nice kind of citrusy, light notes to it. But then we also have some salt in it as well for the finish. And I'm not joking. When I drink this beer, I literally want to run, take a case, and go sit in sand on a beach somewhere. I taste it, and I go, I need to be somewhere. I need to be on the beach.
Right.
It is a very refreshing, well-balanced, still full-flavored beer that you can consume and not get really, really full on.
Yeah, get pie-eyed after 2 hours.
So what do you think? You're drinking it?
I like it a lot.
Yeah, like it a lot.
But when you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when you are faced with drinking beer every day, as we are, sometimes this is exactly
what you need.
Yeah. This whole beer, for me, as far as the marketing and the name behind it, this was born from the whole spring break, Texas swimming hole, skinny dipping, just having fun, being around water, whether it's an ocean or a lake. The name is actually interesting. So I do a lot of hiking and backpacking. I go to Colorado several times a year. And there's a trip I do with my buddies in Colorado. We do this Conundrum Hot Springs trip. 102-degree water. It's a 20-mile hike. It's brutal. So we're up there. We're sitting in this 102-degree water. It's a clothing optional, super hippie, hangout kind of a vibe. And this one guy, one of my friend's buddies, comes running down the hill. He throws his shorts in the air and he says, "Adios pantalones," and he jumps in the hot springs. And instantly I'm like, it's a beir.
It's a good beer name.
Because it is a great
that
beer name.
moment, I wanted to capture that moment of sitting in the mountains at 12,000 feet, hanging out with my buddies in 102-degree water with snow falling around us, and someone throwing their pants in the air. Nobody cared about work, school, what was going on back home, car payments, nothing. It was just have fun and enjoy the moment. So
it is one of the better names that I've ever heard for beer.
To me, it's like an instant vacation in a can.
Yeah.
Can vacation.
Can vacation.
Cancation.
Well, and I think it's interesting too because beer, as with other things, smells and different tastes sort of can transport you to memories of, of that same thing. And yeah, this I could see this as a beach beer or a poolside beer.
Yeah.
Or campfire, sitting around by the campfire.
And cut.
We had to take a little break. One of the refrigerators kicked on, and it sounded like a jet airplane. So, but we're back at it, and we'll try and pick up where we left off. Although we've had a beer in the meantime.
There's a few more.
We should have piled up a bunch of cans.
So it's yeah. So we were talking about the Adios Pantalones, but I see this Paleta de Mango over here. What's the story behind that?
That's another beer that we're launching next to Adios Pantalones. They're both coming out right now. It is based on the Paleta de Mango popsicles. When you go south of the border down into Mexico, you'll find the mango popsicles, and they'll sprinkle this little chili lime powder on it. And they're really well known down there. Last year we did a collaboration with a brewery outside of Mexico City. It was a U.S.-Mexico trade convention.
It was with their FTO, their Foreign Trade Organization, and our similar organization, where they wanted to have kind of a feel-good story with all the garbage that's going on with the border and all that. It's just, we still do business with Mexico, we still do commerce, we still do this, we still do that. So they came with this great idea, beer is very social, it's a fellowship type opportunity. So they decided to go around the country and pair up a couple American craft breweries with some Mexican craft breweries. And so we went down and we got paired up with this great little brewery, and we came up with an idea to kind of pair up a little bit of what we're about and a little bit about what they're about. So for my German heritage, we decided, well, let's just do a simple German Kolsch style beer. And then we decided to pair it up with something that you can get down in Mexico and some of the spices that are down there. So in Mexico, they have you go down and get a popsicle. It's called a paleta. And they'll sprinkle some chili lime salt on top. And I guess it's
Paleta de Mango.
Paleta de Mango. So we decided to incorporate that with another kind of south of the border type of fruit with a mango, and come up with a beer that had a very crisp, refreshing style of product, liquid in it, and then also with the mango and the chili lime salt to kind of incorporate some of that south of the border flavors as well. And it came out so delicious, so wonderful, that we decided that we had to brew this beer on a year-round basis. So that's what we do. You wouldn't believe the amount of mango that goes into every batch of beer.
They got to do something with it.
I'm starting to wonder if this is really an economical format for making a beer, but it's so. I always use this word yummy, but it is yummy. It's really delicious, and definitely different. It leaves a little bit of a spicy zip on the finish in the back of your throat, but you get that wonderful mango fresh, citrusy front part on drinking the beer.
It's a friend of tacos for sure.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Taco Tuesday, especially where we're at, the whole tacos, the food trucks, the Mexican food, it's a really big deal around here. We pride ourselves in our tacos, Tex-Mex, and everything. So having two beers actually launching that are going to pair up really well with the whole taco vibe going on. I think just from a marketing aspect, that's what I'm going to speak to mostly. It just makes a lot of sense. Every day you're stumbling onto a new taco truck or a new Mexican restaurant opening up in town. So it's just a good opportunity all around.
I've got to ask, tell me about Ugly Pug.
Yeah.
You want me to tell the story?
You tell the story.
Okay.
I've heard it a million times.
Ugly Pug is our third brand that we came out with. But the story goes back to about 2 years before we opened up the brewery. I was with my wife's family at the time, and it was a Thanksgiving, and we were just, actually I think we were drinking some of my home brew during Thanksgiving.
It was probably
and we were laughing, having a great time, and I walked in from outside, and my mother-in-law has this little pug dog.
Had.
And his name's Oscar.
We'll get to that part.
But I would walk in, and he was sitting on the couch, like watching TV.
Yeah.
And, he wasn't sitting like a normal dog on his haunches. He was sitting on his behind, stretched out, laid out, kind of like this.
Right.
And it's a male dog, so you can imagine what this looks like. If he had a remote control in a beer, you'd be set for Sunday afternoons. But I walked in and saw this dog, and I looked at my mother-in-law, and I said, Shirley, God bless you, I love you, but that is one ugly pug. And there was dead silence. And we were all thinking the same thing, and I was like, kind of started laughing. I said, wouldn't that be a great name for a dark beer if we ever opened a brewery?
Yeah.
Ha, ha, ha. And lo and behold, we did open a brewery, and we came out with a German-style black lager, or Schwarzbier, that has been, one of our mainstays for 14 years. Other black lagers have come and gone in this market, but the Ugly Pug seems to stick around. It's actually, I think, coming through a revival right now. It's really getting popular in some of the new states that we're expanding our distribution into. But it's a dark beer for sure, but it's very light and still crisp with subtle notes of coffee, some roast in it as well, and some chocolate, hints of chocolate. But it's still a lager beer. It's still very crisp. It still finishes really, really fresh and very, very easy to drink. And it's just a fun beer. Before we used to have Oscar the Pug dog actually on the label, on the bottle.
Right.
The first run of cans that we ever did. But unfortunately, Oscar is no longer with us. But it's fun when I do events. We start talking about the Ugly Pug, and I know they've had a beer or two in them. I start talking about the beer and how Oscar's gone, but he still lives on because we got him stuffed and he's on the bar at the brewery, and of course people laugh and joke. And I said, no, that's not true.
He's right here.
We actually got him cremated, and now in every batch of Ugly Pug, we throw a little bit of, and I said that's what gives this nice roasty characteristic.
That smoky kind of.
Yeah,
liquid Oscar.
Everyone laughs about that. I said, no, he's not. He's buried out at Lake Witherford with a big slice of pizza because that was one of his favorite foods, and hopefully he's looking down from doggy heaven laughing about the whole thing. So he was a great dog. He was a typical pug dog.
Yep.
Well,
They're really cute when they're young, and then something happens to them.
Yeah.
I like the Ugly Pug from the aspect of, again, only being into craft beer for just a few years now. It wasn't too long ago that I had that mentality that a lot of people have when they walk in here. Oh, I don't do dark beers.
Right.
They think heavy, bold, over the top, high in
Filling.
calories.
Yeah.
So I remember being that person just a few years ago. So now when I have people come in, I get really excited for them to try it. And, 9 times out of 10, they're really surprised. That other time, they're just an idiot. But I always like to tell them, the best way that I could put it from a simple term is, when you eat cereal like Fruit Loops, your milk turns pink. Well, when you brew beer with water and the malt's roasted, the water's just going to turn dark. But it doesn't mean that it's heavy. It doesn't mean that it's syrupy or thick like motor oil, which a lot of people have that, preconceived notion.
Right.
So it's really neat I'll give them a blonde and let them try that because, I don't drink craft beers. And they're like, well, that's pretty good. I'm like, let me show you something. And I'll follow it up with a pug and I'll pour it. And they start running away. And then I explain that to them and they give it a try and they usually like it. So it's a pretty cool deal.
Well, guys, like old Oscar, all good things must come to an end.
Yeah.
And this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed this. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the viewer has as well. And with that, thanks for the invite.
Thanks for coming.
Cheers, and
Prost,
Texas and Miss Lily, and we'll see you next time.
Adios, pantalones.